my name is Kat and I am a teaching artist here at the Edna Arts, and I'm going to cover a drawing lesson that will be provided to you all. So when you see in your kit, you will see your pencil, eraser, and your blender. So let's get started. All right, so what we are going to be creating is a drawing that is going to be a very realistic balancing like rocks formation that you're really just going to be creating by yourself. You don't need to have any rock references. You can just really use this from your own imagination, or you could use some reference photos if you'd like. Okay, so let's get started. Now first we're going to make the most heavy rock. So in our imagination, you're going to create some type of like boulder or however large the rock is to you. And I'm really just creating very simple lines and creating some type of structure that is going to be the foundation for my balancing rocks. So this rock is going to be visually more heavy than the rest, and it's going to be a lot larger and more, big overall. So go ahead and just create some shape, some line, and maybe when you're creating your largest rock, maybe it's a little bit more smooth, maybe it's more bumpy at the end. So really just find the flow of the line with your rock and just go with it. So I've kind of redrew the shape of the rock and kind of all brought it all together. So first I have my main rock. It's very heavy in my visual reality, and then I'm going to keep stacking my rocks on top of each other. So now I'm going to create my second rock. Now your balancing rocks, they might be different shapes, different sizes, and you might have different amounts of rocks on top of each other. They don't necessarily have to be like the 6 behind me. You can do 3, you can do 4, you can do 2 if you wanted, but I would recommend at least maybe 3 or 4, whatever you want within your page. So again, I'm just really creating random, like large rocky shapes. I'm not thinking too much about, the exact lines of my rocks. I'm really just thinking about, okay, if I had to create a rock, what would it look like? So maybe your rocks are a little bit more round, maybe they're a little bit more flat, maybe they're more jagged. So think about those lines and how you can create them. Now I'm gonna make a larger rock on top, and in my world, I think gravity will still allow for this larger rock to be on top. So it might not make perfect sense, but that's okay. It's your own imagination, and you are creating your own balance in your own mind. So cool. I've already created like 5 different rocks that are all stacking on top of each other, and they kind of have almost like a pattern going on. I have like one really large, second one is very like long and smooth almost, the third one is a little bit more blocky, and then they kind of had a visual like pattern going up. But you can create any rocks. You can create more circular ones, more square, cube shaped rocks. Really, as long as you create whatever shape that makes sense in your head for the rocks, go ahead and just make it. Okay, great. So now that you have created your maybe 3 to 5 or 6 rocks stacked on top of each other, as long as you get the general outline, you want to just keep it very simple, and then slowly we'll add more detail as we reach to the top of our balancing rocks. So I'm going to actually start again with like the bottom rock. When I'm creating my details of my rock, I'm going to think about maybe the like edges and like all the little contours of the rocks and all the little facets that each rock might have. So I'm just going to create lines maybe going in horizontal ways that, maybe the rock's going more upwards, maybe there's some slopes downward, maybe there's like a few like jagged areas, maybe there's some cracks within the rocks. What's great about these rock drawings is that there's really no wrong way to create it because rocks are so different that even if you were to make it wrong, it's okay because yeah, rocks will never look the same. So yeah, you can really just play around with the line, and maybe you want your rock to be more smooth. So if you want to create more smooth lines, that's totally okay. But I'm just really trying to create some like facets and some lines just to give my rock more like edges and areas and crevices. So after I've made some type of like sloped areas within my rocks, I'm gonna just find an area in which I can start shading. So I'm just gonna find maybe a crevice in mine and just start shading in. And what I'm doing is that I'm applying pressure to my pencil. So when I create really dark areas, I'm creating really dark values. And this will make the idea that rocks have texture, they have value, they have like their own personality, their own identity. Again, rocks, there's no like wrong or right rock in this world. They are so different. So really just play around with your line techniques and your shading. So I'm really just applying pressure to my pencil, and I'm just going over some areas. So I'm really just stacking up my lines and just shading in very carelessly too. Your rocks don't have to be super smooth again, or they can be depending on you. But I'm gonna have this rock like super jagged, so my line techniques are gonna be a little bit more harsh, and they're gonna be very expressionful. They're gonna have a lot of expression. But yeah, I'm just gonna start layering, and I can show you also right now like what some hatching techniques look like. So what hatching is when you have lines going in one direction. So I'm going to show you this hatching right here. So I'm having my lines going up and down, and I'm just going, all across. And then when I cross over, it's going to create some values once I cross over. So then you'll have like a grid marking. So that's what hatching is. And then you also have, when you have the hatching on top of each other, that's called cross hatching. And you're really just creating like your own values as you do these line techniques. So hatching is when it's like singular marks next to each other. And then cross hatching is when it's completely across and it creates like a grid and little squares. So that's the difference of like hatching and cross hatching. And you could just, play around with like these line techniques. Again, like I'm really not thinking too much about my lines. I'm really just having fun. I'm playing around. Again, rocks, there is no wrong or right. These rocks don't have to be of this reality. They could just be very, very imaginative. So this is some cross hatching that I'm doing, and I might go back and forth from adding darks and lights and hatching and cross hatching, so you can really like interplay and layer all of these techniques together. And maybe I might go more smooth, and then maybe I'm just gonna slowly just start shading. Again, I'm applying a lot of pressure to my pencil, and then I'm getting a lot lighter if I don't want too much value. So when I want a lot of value and a lot of darkness, I'm gonna apply a lot of pressure, and then I'm gonna get super lighter. So yeah, I'm just really trying to create my rock to be very just have different like drawing areas. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep working, and yeah, I'm just gonna go for it. What's nice about this like drawing is that it's very like high contrast, and what high contrast means is that when you have like very dark and very light, areas. So it's like stark contrast. So when you think about like a photograph, when it's like a black and white photograph and there's like high exposure, there's gonna be like a lot of contrast when there's like black and white elements. So as you can see from like the drawing behind me, I have most of my rocks are pretty much on the gray side, but there's, you know, one rock that's like really bold and really dramatic and dark. So you can kind of select which rocks are going to be the most dramatic for you if you want. I might add a lot of value for like the large one, and then slowly I can get from like darkest to lightest for my rocks. Or if you want to play around, you have like a dark one on top, you know, middle value in the middle, or light value at the bottom. You don't have to do, you know, from dark to light for the rocks, but however you want to do it. I did it in like so many different values. I had lights, I had some darks, and then I had like a really dark one up at the top. But yeah, I'm just really playing around with this drawing, and I'm just sketching in so many different like directions. So just have fun with the pencil, and you know, be free, and you know, be very expressive when you're creating your hatching. You can go really harsh, you can go really light. Okay, so as you're drawing, you're probably realizing like which, you know, lines I make, which areas should I have from dark to light. This drawing, it's very intuitive. So if you think about like balancing rocks, like if you want to think about that within yourself and trying to create like some balance in your life, and really just find this, you know, process and this art making as a very like, you know, free, therapeutic way. There's really, again, no right or wrong to create this, and you're really just allowing your pencil to just be as free as possible, letting it move the way you want it to move. So if you want to be more, you know, sketchy with it, if you want to be more lighter, if you want to get all of your frustrations out on the pencil, you know, go for it. This is a very like intuitive way of drawing without thinking about realism, thinking about these associations with art. So just, you know, let it go. Okay, so now that you're done with our first rock, we're gonna move on to our second rock. So my first rock is it's very rough. The lines are very harsh, and all my lines are kind of just very expressive. I wasn't really thinking about smoothness or, flowing, soft rocks. I was thinking very jagged, very edgy rocks for my first one. So what I'm going to try to do for my second one is that I'm going to try to do the complete opposite. So that way, this allows my drawing to just have a variety of like texture. So if my first rock was, more, intense, very jagged, very rough, very dark, maybe I'm going to have my second rock be the polar opposite. So maybe I'm going to go with more smooth lines. Maybe I'm going to have more organic lines, even more like round features. So that way, when I look at my drawing, I can see like just different parts of a drawing. And that way it's not completely the same for the entire thing. So if I'm going to have it complete opposite, I'm going to try to just go very light with my pencil. For the bottom rock, I went really hard, very, intense. This one I'm going to just kind of relax a little bit more, be more flowy and kind of bring out these organic shapes one by one. So the way I'm going to do this, again, maybe you're thinking about like the edges of your rock. So if you want to start very slow with your pencil, you can just, find a line. And I'm starting to like the lines that I'm already creating. I'm going to have like the lines kind of just like melt into another. I'm thinking about, the wave, those rocks and how they have like these very pretty like lines flowing. So maybe I'm going to have my rock kind of be more melty looking, similar to the wave. So I'm going to just allow these lines to kind of just like flow. And maybe I'm even going to like create a pattern with my rock. So I'm creating this very like diagonal way and like this pattern, and I'm not applying too much pressure. I'm just going very light, and I'm gonna slowly create like this very, very soft way of like drawing. I'm very smooth, I'm not super rough, so I'm trying to do the complete opposite on what I just did. And this will allow us to just be more, experimental with our drawing. Us as artists, we might have certain tendencies in which you want to be more, jagged and rough with your drawing, and then maybe you are the artist who likes to be more, soft, more light. But it's always good to try to do both. You never want to stick to just one thing. You want to try to experiment with all different, ways and, methods of expression. So, if you want to go soft with one thing and then go really rough and like jagged with the other, like it's good to have many different textures, and you might create your own texture. It might be a little mix of both. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. It could be a little mix. So maybe you'll have a very smooth rock but have some jagged parts. So I'm just really creating this like almost this very wavy pattern. So I'm just gonna create some of these like smooth lines. I don't know, I'm thinking about like planet Jupiter and like all these really nice swirls, and how they kind of just like flow. Or I'm thinking also about like, Vincent van Gogh and those flowy lines that he creates. And they kind of just flow within like a repetition of movement. So I'm really just going nice and soft. And I'm just gonna go very light. I'm not going as hard as I was before. So I'm just gonna find areas in which I can fill in the areas and go nice and light. So I'm really just trying to be, more on a pause and not rushing my drawing. So I'm just gonna take my time with it. Like again, there's no rush to complete this drawing. So you might find yourself, already done with your entire rock drawings, but maybe there's a few rocks that you really want to keep pushing. Then yeah, you might find yourself also wanting to do, only smooth rocks, which is totally fine. Again, it does not matter. But again, I'm just roughly going back and forth using very light pressure, and I'm using like the side of my pencil to really just fill in the areas. Because yeah, when I use like the side of my pencil, I'm going to be a lot more quick to fill in like the areas. Because if I do like the tip of the pencil, it's going to take me a while, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But again, if you want to speed things up with the shading and filling in all the colors, or excuse me, all the values, it'll be a lot easier if you use the side of your pencil. So my drawing for this rock is quite light. That's okay. I might go back and add some more value, but for now I'm just going very light, very smooth, very loose. And I'm really just thinking about going in one direction. So yeah, I'm being very intentional. I want this rock to be nice and smooth, so whatever your intent is with certain rocks, go with it. Okay, so my rock is like very nice and smooth. So if you want to start using your blender tool, what's nice about a blender tool is that we can really just start allowing the areas to be very nice and smooth. A lot of the times too is that when we use our blending tool, it's like a shortcut to like make it look realistic, which is totally fine. If that's what you're going for, it's really great. But also like we don't always want to rely on our blending tool. So you can smudge definitely for like the entire area, but don't completely rely on it as well. So maybe you'll smooth over some areas, but don't rely on it for the entire drawing, because this is what creates a good drawing, is when you actually like put in all the different like line techniques, because you can see the difference of like something that was hand drawn versus like completely all blended. But it's good to have a mix of both, as long as you are, again, very intentional. So yeah, I'm just smoothing out some of the lines, but I'm not completely blurring out the entire rock. I'm really just going in certain areas and blending it. Again, I'm not going over the entire drawing for it to be blended. I can still go back with my pencil and still create those smooth areas that I want. So I'm just kind of going back and forth. But yeah, a blender tool, once you apply it, you'll see that the dark and the medium values will start to like blend in and mix into another. Yeah, it creates like this very like hazy area of your values. So go ahead and just keep doing that. But again, don't rely on it too much. So I would say right now, like the rock is nice and pretty smooth, but I'm gonna still create maybe some like depths and areas. So I'm gonna go back because I like this value. It's still a very like middle value, but I think it could still have some contrast. So I'm gonna add some darker values, but still keep that smoothness. And what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna apply a lot of pressure to my pencil, but just go nice and slow. So I can still add pressure and still create a smoothness and not create such harshness with my line making. I can be very slow, very methodic. And you might just like go back and forth just a little bit when creating this dark area. So again, you're being very thoughtful with this mark making. And maybe you'll have even like very light areas where the line isn't completely there. I'm doing like this, almost like a heartbeat, like zigzaggy look. So yeah, you can really create different lines. It doesn't all have to be one straight line. Like they can be, you know, zigzags, they can be more circular. Because again, like your drawing can be whatever you want it to be. Okay, so yeah, I'm slowly going back and forth and trying to create like these dark values within my rock. So I'm gonna add a little bit more, but maybe I'll be very intentional and just, you know, allow my pencil to flow. Okay. Okay, so I kind of have both two rocks complete to the point in which I want. I can keep going, of course, if I wanted. But I do want to make the distinction of, you know, where the rock sits on top of each other. Because again, I know you said that this wasn't based on realism, but if you did want to do the whole realism thing, you do want to signify that these rocks are stacking on top of each other. Right now with my drawing, it's starting to look like they're kind of just one rock. So I still want to have these two rocks distinguishable from each other. So the way I'm going to do that is that the bottom of the second rock and the top of the rock, where those two lines intersect, I want to make sure that they are nice and bold. So that way, that way I can know that these two rocks are still separate from another. So what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna create a very dark line at the bottom of my second rock, just so I know that these two rocks are completely separate from each other. So I made a really dark line, and the bottom of the second rock and the top of the first rock, they're gonna have like an intersecting line together because, you know, if they're stacked on top of each other, like they're going to share like the same line. So I'm really creating this area nice and dark. So where they intersect, I'm gonna create this very dark area. Now, in order for me to attempt realism, I'm gonna create some type of shadow for my bottom rock. So as you can see, I'm just really thinking if my light source was maybe at the top and there's like shadow underneath, I would have, you know, a shadow at the bottom of this rock, and I'm really just, you know, going back and forth over like the pattern that I created for this rock, and I'm just creating a nice, you know, dark shadow. So again, I'm applying pressure, I'm creating some type of shadow if I am going for a very like realism look with these rocks. So that way, you know, if rocks are stacked together, like they're going to have shadows, you know, at the bottom. And then maybe you want to do more of a shadow on like the sides if you want. Again, like your rocks will be multifaceted, so you might have some more values in certain areas. So again, I did like a shadow at the bottom of my second rock. And in order for me to continue this like realism look, I'm also gonna add a shadow at the top of the first rock. So I'm gonna go back and just add some more value and more dark value to the top, because, you know, if two things are sitting on each other, one's gonna have a shadow at the bottom, and then that top is also going to have a shadow as well. So again, this is if you are going for that realism look, but, you know, for those folks who are really just going off with, you know, intuition, it's okay if you don't want to do these shadows. But again, this is just a way for you to understand that when objects are on top of each other, they're going to create shadows. It's going to have more depth, space, and that these are like, you know, tangible objects that we can like actually touch and feel. So this is also why I'm creating the shadows. It's because like I want so that when I look at the drawing, you know, I can see and I can feel that, you know, these rocks are, you know, 3D objects. So I'm gonna keep adding some of these shadows. Okay, so now I have my second rock and my third rock. There's a shadow underneath the second rock, and then there's a little bit of shadow on the top rock. So again, if these two objects were on top of each other, they would have some type of shadow, realistically. But again, you don't have to go for the realism if it's not your thing. Okay, so now that you have completed your second rock, you're gonna move on to your third rock. So now that I am looking at these two rocks, I wanna have a completely different. So for this rock, I'm gonna have it really dark. I think I'm going to have it as like possibly like the darkest rock. And I'm gonna add a lot of pressure to my pencil. And I'm really just like digging in to the tip of the pencil. So when you are putting your value, just really try to bring out the darkest darks. And I'm just going, you know, back and forth with my pencil. And again, I'm just really digging in. And I'm going back and forth, up and down. And then I'm probably gonna do, again, the same. I'm gonna do it in another area. So I'm gonna have the darkest of darks as best as I can. And I'm just gonna go back and forth and create these, almost like, yeah, these hatching lines. Going back and forth. Then I'm gonna do more. And I'm just slowly spreading out my shading. So I'm going again in different directions. Because again, rocks, they're very multifaceted, so it doesn't really matter which direction we're going for the rock. So I'm gonna maybe go back, and now I'm gonna do more of these lines overlapping into each other, and I'm doing like these diagonals. So I'm going really, really hard as best as I can. And then also with your blender tool, you might be able to get like even more darker values once you smudge it all together. But again, we want to make sure that we are utilizing our drawing techniques and creating these blending parts ourselves. And you might find yourself really going hard, you know, on your pencil, so you might have to sharpen in between as you are creating these rocks. You might find yourself liking a lot more darker values than like these medium values. So yeah, just be very careful when you're drawing to, you know, make sure that your pencil isn't dying out, so make sure you sharpen when you can. So again, I'm going back and forth. Okay, so yeah, already this is creating some type of texture. as I'm looking at the rock, yeah, sometimes like the textures, if you're kind of confused on what your texture might look like, down the line you might figure it out yourself. Because yeah, sometimes it's good to come in to drawing without like any expectation, you know, just having fun, enjoying it. So I'm just gonna do more darker value at the bottom of the rock. So I'm really just gonna dig in with my pencil. I might use like the top of the pencil. I might even start to go on the side of the pencil. But again, I'm really just applying a lot of pressure to my pencil as I'm going along. And again, you can go, you know, up and down, across, and just, you know, continue to overlap these shading techniques. Awesome. So now that you've completed your third rock, again, if you want to go for the realism, if you want to add some type of shadow on the second rock, so that way, you know, again, if your rocks are stacked to each other, there's going to create some shadow for the bottom. So just create like a nice light shadow. And again, this is if we are going for the realism. So just create a very nice, like probably a dark shadow too, just because if the rock's like really, really dark, I feel like, you know, you still want to bring out that value because, you know, you want to make sure it's distinguished from like the rock and the shadow. So go ahead and also add that value to the top. So yeah, I'm just creating some type of shadow that's similar to the rock that's above it. So that's why I'm trying to create like this, you know, shape right underneath. So again, if they were stacked on each other, where would the shadow be? So again, I'm just adding my shadow just so it looks like they're all on top of each other. And then you can go back to, like, if you want to create more of a shadow for the third rock, you totally can. But since this rock is like our darkest value, it might be a little bit harder. So if you want, you can always, again, use your blending tool. So if you really want to punch in those like shadows, you could use your blending tool, or if you want to have more of the darker values to be super dark, you know, start to blend it with your blending tool. And then, yeah, you will notice also that all of these lines that cross over into each other, there might be some like white areas. So if you are not a fan of those, you can always just, you know, keep blending. But again, you don't want to completely rely on the blending tool. It's just really an aid for you to help you complete it. So don't rely heavily on the blending tool. Always use it probably for like the last parts of your drawing. Just because I know everyone loves the blending tool, that they get super carried away with it. So just slowly, you know, be very careful on how much blending you're doing. Okay, so yeah, I think that blending is pretty good. Even like at the bottom of the shadow of the second rock, I can tell that it's a shadow. Okay, so for this rock, I'm gonna do very light value. I'm sketching very, very lightly, and my hatching is very light as well. So most of my rocks for this drawing, a lot of it's like very mid value. So they're more like on the gray side. And then I'm gonna have this rock just be a lot lighter than the rest. So I'm just going to do very light, you know, hatching. And maybe I'm gonna do very like large, broad strokes. And then maybe I'm also gonna create some lines. Maybe they're a little jagged, but still I'm trying to create some type of texture with my rock. So I'm just gonna go very light. And this rock will be very on the lighter side of the value scale. So I'm not adding too much pressure with my pencil. I'm just going very light. And I'm just doing very spaced out hatching marks. Now my hatching isn't super close together like I have been doing, and that's because I wanted my hatching to create really dark values, but since I am just doing very light, a lot of my hatching is, you know, very spaced out as well. So the lines, there's more space in between than my previous ones where they were like super next to each other. Okay, so I'm gonna just slowly add, and maybe I'm gonna have, you know, my edges a little bit dark, but I'm gonna have the majority of my rock be very light in value. So again, I'm just going very lightly with my pencil. I'm not thinking too much about, you know, all of the details with this one. I'm really just thinking about light, simple. So yeah, I'm just going very lightly with my pencil. I'm doing a few diagonal marks. Maybe I'll go back, do a little bit more. So I'm doing like the exact same things that I've been doing, but this time I'm really just making it super light. I'm not thinking too much about all of the value. But in order to create like the form of the rock, I'm gonna create that dark outline, just so you know, like this is a rock and it's heavy and there's shape, there's volume. So if you're starting to realize like, okay, well, it looks like my rock's disappearing into thin air, that's okay. You can definitely like still outline your rock, just so you know that this is, you know, an object in space, there's edges to it. So you can still, you know, keep the values of the rock very light, and then, you know, continue to maybe like do an outline value around the rock. Because again, we don't want the rock to look like it's like in thin air. Okay. So yeah, I kind of like this rock. This one's like very simple. It's not too detailed. Okay, great. So I'm gonna move on to my last rock. And again, I'm gonna create some type of shadow for like the bottom. So that way, like I know it's, you know, layering on top of the other rock. So I'm gonna do a little value right over here, a little shadow, because again, like these rocks are touching together in space. So I do wanna have these shadows included. So I'm just gonna add that darkness to the bottom. Again, my rocks are touching each other. I'm gonna add a little bit more. Okay, cool. So yeah, for my last rock, I'm gonna see if I'm gonna try to create like this, maybe like this circular shape. So I'm gonna make hatch marks, but this time, instead of it going up and down, I'm gonna create like a curved hatch. So maybe this rock is more curved than the usual rocks. This one's more of a round type of rock. So I'm creating my hatch marks as very round shapes. Okay, so for this rock, I'm gonna have the rock be very nice and smooth, very nice and round. So when I think about a round shape, I really want to try to create like that C shape with my hatching. So I'm just gonna create these hatch marks that are nice and round, and I'm gonna like, you know, start to layer them. And then maybe I'm gonna start creating like the depth of the rock and just slowly build and create these curved lines. So I'm just making it nice and round. Like even the bottom, I'm kind of creating the marks as if it was like, you know, like a football, and I'm really just trying to round this rock out. So I'm just gonna create another like curvy surface at the top. Maybe it goes round again at the top. So yeah, so many ways to create like rocks and different textures, different line techniques, different values. Maybe I'm gonna have it go around like this. It's starting to look like a piece of bread, but that's okay. Okay. And, you know, go ahead and go back and forth if you feel like, you know, you want to add more value. And I'm just going to continue these like horizontal marks. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and also continue like this jagged, not jagged, I'm going to create more of an outline for my rock. Again, you might realize with your drawing for your rock that it's very like almost like cloud-like. So if you want to make sure that these are rocks in your head, like make that outline so that way you know like these are heavy things and they have, you know, a lot of mass, a lot of weight to them. So you can, you know, definitely create this outline so you can signify like these are rocks, these are not clouds, these are not balls, they're rocks and they're heavy, so they're gonna have a nice outline. And I'm just gonna go ahead and keep kind of rounding off my rock, and I'm gonna continue the shadow at the bottom. So again, if they're stacking on top of each other, I'm really trying to create this type of realism. And then same thing for the bottom rock that's right underneath it. I'm gonna create a shadow as well. So that way I know they're stacked on each other. Okay. Awesome job, everyone. So thank you so much for participating with this rock balancing drawing. I hope you can, hang it up on your wall and, find a sense of balance in your life. Again, so what we learned with this drawing is that we did cover line techniques such as hatching, cross hatching. We also went over value. And with value, you create the darkest of dark and then you create the lightest of light by applying certain pressures to your pencil. We also learned about, shape and texture. So when we create shapes such as rocks, we make them very heavy looking. Even with texture, we can create, different smoothness, different qualities of edginess. So yeah, thanks so much for learning all these techniques with me. We hope that you can attend more classes here at the Edna Arts. So if you have questions, please visit us at tempe.gov/EdnaArts. Awesome, thanks so much.